Hello, and welcome to the Worker Environmental Awareness Program training for the Amoruso Specific Plan. The purpose of this training is to ensure that all personnel working on the Amoruso Ranch project understand and comply with environmental requirements outlined in the permits and regulations. This includes protecting special status wildlife and plant species, avoiding impacts to wetlands and waterways, following proper site access and work area restrictions, and implementing spill prevention and waste management protocols. Failure to follow these measures can result in project delays, legal consequences, and harm to protected habitats. The Amoruso Ranch project will be completed in 3 phases, each requiring careful environmental planning. Additionally, the Amoruso Preserve is a key part of this project, which is designated for long-term conservation. Protecting the preserve and adjacent natural areas is a top priority, requiring strict adherence to environmental guidelines. Several special status wildlife species may be encountered during construction. These include northwestern pond turtle, nesting birds, burrowing owl, Swainson's hawk, and vernal pool fairy shrimp. The northwestern pond turtle is a medium-sized turtle with a dark brown to olive shell and yellowish markings on its head and limbs. This species is a California species of special concern and is also currently a candidate species for federal listing. The northwestern pond turtle typically inhabits slow-moving streams, ponds, and wetlands. If a turtle is encountered, all activities must stop and a designated biologist must be notified immediately. Handling or moving turtles without authorization is strictly prohibited. The designated biologist will determine the appropriate response. All nesting birds are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and California Fish and Game Code. Nesting bird species may vary, but also may include raptors, songbirds, and waterfowl. If construction occurs during the nesting bird season, February 1st through September 30th, pre-construction nesting bird surveys will be conducted. If active nests are found, buffer zones will be established and work restrictions may apply. Any disturbance to nest, eggs, or young birds is strictly prohibited. The burrowing owl is a small, long-legged owl with brown plumage, white spotting, and striking yellow eyes. Unlike most owls, it is active during the day and nests in burrows abandoned by ground squirrels or other burrowing animals. Burrowing owls may also utilize construction staging areas, seeking shelter in wood piles, covered materials, or other stored equipment. The burrowing owl is a California species of special concern and is currently listed as a candidate species for state listing. Burrowing owls are protected under state law. Pre-construction surveys will identify any occupied burrows, and if owls are present, specific avoidance measures must be implemented. Per conditions of CDFW 1602, if burrows are determined to be actively in use, avoidance and minimization measures shall be implemented, including but not limited to establishing a 250-foot non-disturbance buffer around active burrows during the breeding season and a 160-foot non-disturbance buffer during the non-breeding season. Any work within these buffers must receive prior approval from the on-site monitoring biologist, as explicit authorization from CDFW is required. Additionally, entering designated buffers for any reason, including on foot, is strictly prohibited unless accompanied by the monitoring biologist. These measures help prevent unnecessary disturbance to burrowing owls and ensure compliance with environmental regulations. The Swainson's hawk is a large raptor with a distinctive dark brown back, white underparts, and long pointed wings. This species is listed as threatened under California Endangered Species Act and nests in tall trees near fields and grasslands. If nesting Swainson hawks are found within the project area, large avoidance buffers will be required. A designated biologist will monitor nests, and any work within the buffer zone will require agency approval. The vernal pool fairy shrimp is a tiny translucent crustacean that grows about to 1 inch in length. It has a delicate, elongated body and swims upside down using its many pairs of legs. This species is federally threatened and inhabits seasonal wetlands known as vernal pools. These habitats are highly sensitive and are legally protected. Construction activities must avoid disturbing vernal pools, and all workers must adhere to designated access routes and buffer zones. Any accidental impacts must be reported immediately. Wetlands and waterways are protected under the Clean Water Act and California state regulations. No unauthorized work, dumping, or refueling is allowed near these areas. Workers must follow designated access routes, erosion control measures to prevent habitat destruction and contamination. Several measures are in place to ensure compliance with environmental regulations. These include limiting access routes and staging areas to minimize habitat disturbance, prohibiting refueling or vehicle maintenance within 300 feet of a waterway, constructing cofferdams with clean materials to prevent water contamination, implementing dust control measures while preventing runoff into streams, and following the project's spill prevention, containment, and cleanup plan to address hazardous materials. Additional protection measures include a designated biologist having the authority to stop work if environmental regulations are violated. Wildlife must be allowed to leave the area unharmed if encountered. Work must stop immediately if any California ESA listed species are observed, and CDFW must be notified. All pipes and materials must be checked for wildlife before use, and invasive species prevention measures such as equipment washing must be followed. All personnel must follow best practices to maintain compliance, which include keeping all food and trash properly secured to avoid attracting wildlife, using only approved materials in work areas, reporting any spills, wildlife encounters, or environmental concerns immediately, and understanding that violations of environmental laws can result in project delays, fines up to $50,000, and legal consequences.
So we're going to be, Cogstone Resource Management will be providing mitigation services for this project. The mitigation requirements require construction management and field personnel to receive paleontological awareness training, and so this will be a part of that. So what's ahead, just in this brief summary, is what are paleontological resources? What kind of resources might we expect to find here? When Cogstone monitors are present, what will they be doing? What are your responsibilities? And what are some common questions you might have about the paleontology component of this project? Paleontological resources are, that's another term for fossils, and fossils can come in a variety of ways. You can have invertebrates, which are animals without a spinal cord or a spinal column, and these will consist of things like shells, clams, snails, things like that, as well as animal burrows. And usually those can occur in relatively large beds, sometimes with thousands or even hundreds of thousands of organisms. So we aren't going to collect every single one of those. We can collect a representative sample. Vertebrates are a little different, and this is what most people think of when they think of fossils. Vertebrates are animals with skeletons, with a backbone. So whether it's dinosaurs or what we're going to be looking at here, Ice Age animals, that's the sort of thing that you would expect with a vertebrate. However, vertebrates can range from the very large, like mammoths, to the very small, like turtles, lizards, and rodents, and we will be responsible for looking for all of those. And then there are things like trace fossils. Those aren't actual parts of an organism. They are things that are left behind by organisms. Things like coprolites, which is fossil poop, or trackways, footprints, or things of that nature. So in terms of this project, what kind of resources do we have here? Well, there's a couple of formations here, the Riverbank Formation and the Turlock Lake Formation, which have produced Ice Age fossils. This mammoth you see here is a cast of a skeleton that was recovered from Turlock Lake sediments. And so this is just one example of the kind of remains that might be found on the project. These are animals that are from the Pleistocene epoch, the Ice Ages. It's a period of time that started about 2.6 million years ago and ended around 11,000 years ago. And there have been all sorts of fossils from this region from Ice Age sediments, mammoths and direwolves, saber-toothed cats, camels, horses, bison, ground sloth, tapirs, all sorts of different organisms. And so any one of them or groups of them might be present on the property. And if their remains are exposed, we will be there to recover them. These are just some examples. These are some horse fossils from the Turlock Lake Formation. And you can see the preservation is actually maybe not completely perfect, but you've got right here, just in this one slide, from one site, you've got 3 different individuals, including that juvenile, a very young foal, across the bottom of the screen there. And so this is the sort of thing paleontologists are going to be looking for, is fossils like this. This is what fossils look like in the ground, and sometimes they can be a lot more difficult to discern. And this is why it's important, and I will talk about this, it's important that if you see something that you don't necessarily recognize, it's not necessarily a rock, you aren't necessarily sure, the best thing you can do is avoid it and have the paleontologist on site come over and evaluate it. Because if it turns out to be a rock or a chunk of concrete or something like that, then no harm, no foul. If it actually is a fossil, then it's important to preserve it with its context, where it was found. That helps enhance the scientific significance of the specimen. And so it can be difficult to see these things in the ground. Nevertheless, we will be there. We actually have a trained team that's good at that, but you can help us with this as well. Preserving fossils is important because even though there are going to be animals like we just talked about, mammoths and horses, ground sloths, and so on, each of those organisms has a story to tell in terms of its fossil, whether it's the age of the animal when it died, the sex of the animal when it died, the health of the animal when it died, and so forth. And taking these fossils and putting them in a regional context and then in a larger continental context, you add to our overall understanding. But what can also happen is you can find something we didn't expect. And this is an example from the Barstow region, from a place called the Barstow Fossil Beds, where this is an example of an extinct peccary that was found by a Cogstone paleontologist who was literally out for a walk. And this species had never been found in that very rich deposit before, and this complete skull, a skull this complete, had not been found. So in addition to the animals that we suspect or the organisms that we suspect are going to be there, there's always the possibility that there's something brand new that you might not find. Closer to where I work in Los Angeles, this is another example, and this is actually from a mitigation site in downtown Los Angeles. This is an extinct species of pronghorn, which is different from the living pronghorn because it had 2 tines on each side of its head rather than just 1 tine. And this organism had never been found in the Los Angeles basin before, never been found, I believe, in Southern California before, and yet we found it on a mitigation site. So again, the emphasis is on collecting a representative sample of everything there, but the potential is also there to find something new and unique and significant, and that potential is always there. There's also the potential for modern bone. And so it's important to keep in mind, again, that you'll need the paleontologist on site to coordinate, to take a look, to make sure that it's not modern bone. If it turns out to be modern bone or historic bone, it's also important to determine whether or not it might be human, in which case all of the rules change, but I'm not going to talk about that here today. In any event, the same thing applies. If you see something that you think might be a bone or a tooth, or if it even looks unusual, the best thing you can do is contact the paleontological site monitor and have them come over and make an evaluation. So what monitors will be doing is exactly what you see in this picture. They will be on the site. They will be looking at the ongoing work to see if any fossils are exposed. In some cases, they may see a fossil in the cut, in which case they will let the equipment operators know and wave them off. There's a kind of a, I guess, a myth out there. We simply ask the excavators to move a little bit or to pause while we get in and evaluate the find. Usually we ask them to move 25 to 50 feet away, and that way we can get in safely, look at the remains, determine whether they're significant, and if so, we can collect them relatively quickly. So equipment operators need to be aware that monitors will be out there, and the monitors we send will be used to working with construction equipment. Sometimes, though, in the event of larger assemblages, if we find a skeleton, we may need to set up an exclusion zone around the find so that we have a prolonged period of time with which to excavate things. That does happen from time to time. Again, it doesn't shut work down. It merely diverts work to other areas of the project. When those exclusion zones are up, please understand that you shouldn't go in them, because you might not recognize when you're inadvertently causing damage to fossils that are being excavated or worked on in that zone. This is an example of this is from Irvine, California, and this is a mammoth skeleton as it was discovered. And so it had to be photo documented. It had to be mapped in place, because again, part of what we do is not just picking up fossils, it's preserving their scientific significance. And in many cases, how a fossil is deposited, how it's oriented, what sediments it's in, and so forth. These are all critical to understanding and preserving the significance of the remains. And so all of those data need to be collected at the time the remains are being excavated. So again, please recognize that this could be, depending on what is found, this could be a prolonged period. That said, if we were to find something like this, we would immediately mobilize more monitors and more excavators to go up there so that the remains could be removed and excavated and taken away from the property as quickly as possible. Sometimes it's necessary to apply a plaster jacket with burlap and plaster in order to preserve the integrity of the fossil. And this can happen from fossils that are the size of your forearm all the way up to something like this. This is actually a mammoth skull that had to be jacketed in order to get it out of the ground. And so the paleontologists on site will use the most appropriate techniques for retrieving fossils, but they also do understand that time is of the essence, that we can't dawdle and take, all day to excavate a single fossil. It's got to happen very quickly. There are timelines, there are budgets, and we're well aware of that. So if you see a paleontologist applying plaster in this manner, please keep in mind that they are doing the best thing for the fossil, but they're also working as quickly as they can. What are your responsibilities for these projects? Well, again, complying with the mitigation program as it's being laid out. And if there is a failure to comply, there can be some fines. Please avoid picking up anything. If you see something, avoid it and contact the paleontological monitor. If you pick it up and move it, number one, you've destroyed the context. Number two, you might forget you have it and inadvertently leave the site with it, which would be a violation. So please, again, if you see something that might be a fossil bone or a fossil tooth, please avoid it. Stop work around a remain if you see it. Don't let the construction equipment keep plowing through it. Don't touch anything. Again, so many times people think they're helping if they just say, okay, we've got to dig there. There's this maybe fossil in the way. I'll lift it up, I'll move it aside and get it out of the way so we can keep digging. Please do not do that. Again, the monitor should be there. If something comes up, stop work in the area, contact the monitor. If the monitor is not immediately available, contact your supervisor so that they can reach out to the monitor. But either way, avoid work until the paleontologist can come in and evaluate the site. If you have lath and flagging available with you, feel free to put it up around the find so that everybody can see where it is. And then, as we mentioned with the exclusion zone, don't impact the flagged off areas. Once you set up the flagging, stay out of those areas. And finally, and this is just something that has come up recently with the advent of social media, if something is found, particularly if it's going to take a prolonged period of time, like a day or two to get it out of the ground, please don't take pictures. And please, if you take pictures for yourself, that's up to the project supervisors. But please don't post them online, because that can, and in the past has, led to other people then figuring out where the site is, coming in there and removing parts of the fossil. The mammoth skull I showed you earlier actually had the tip of one of the tusks removed at night by somebody who snuck onto the site and broke it off. So it really helps not to call attention to these materials until they're safely out of the ground and safely back at the Cogstone warehouse, where they can be prepared in full. And there's some common questions. Will the project shut down? We already talked about this. It's very unlikely, and at Cogstone, we haven't had that happen yet. But we may ask you to stop working in a given specific area until such time as we can assess and potentially move fossil remains. Can you keep what you find? No, all of these fossils are protected by law. They actually will eventually go to a museum or university repository, but that's part of the mitigation conditions. So if you see something, you think it might be a fossil and you want to take it home to give it to your kids, I understand you want to be nice to your kids, and I understand that fossils are cool, but it is illegal. And many times we're asked, how much is that fossil worth? As scientists, we don't put a monetary value on the fossils. Practically each fossil we find scientifically is essentially priceless. And trying to put a price on that sometimes only encourages people to do things that they might not otherwise. So we don't even attempt to put a price on any of these remains. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and we're looking forward to working with eCourt and the team and providing services